So now I'd like to welcome Beth Kidd. She is the Orchard Productivity Manager for Zespri International, as well as Dennis Crowley. I'd like him to come to the stage too. They're going to do a little bit of a tag team here and talk about our own kiwi fruit industry.
Okay, so thanks for the invitation to come and present at your conference. I've been here for the last couple of days, and my colleague Gordon and I have got a stand, and we've really enjoyed getting to interact with beekeepers. So you'll notice I'm not Shane Max. He has had a promotion which sees him working offshore in a global capacity with our offshore growers a lot. So he's really sorry he can't be here today. So on behalf of Shane, I'm going to give you an introduction to where the kiwi fruit industry's going. I'm going to tag team to Dennis, who will talk about kiwi fruit pollination, and then I'll specifically talk about some work we've been doing under hail netting. So just for those of you that don't know, Zespri is a kiwi fruit marketing company. We're a grower-owned cooperative, so all kiwi fruit that is produced in New Zealand that's not sent to Australia has to go through Zespri. So we're 100% grower-owned, which makes us pretty grower-focused, but we don't own any orchards. So growers grow the fruit, pack houses pack the fruit, and Zespri doesn't take ownership of the kiwi fruit until it hits a ship. But we are pretty important right through the supply chain. There's about 12,500 hectares of kiwi fruit in production in New Zealand at the moment. That means that we produce about 400 tonnes per year. Over the last 3 or 4 years, we've really ramped up our global supply business. So that means we've got about 1,300 growers who are growing Zespri plant variety, our gold variety offshore in other countries. So so we've got about 2,000 hectares, and that part of our business is in rapid growth mode. We send our fruit to 56 countries. And from a pollination perspective, that 12,500 hectares works out at using around between 100 and 110,000 hives per year to pollinate. So nowhere near as big as almonds, thank goodness. Okay, so where do we grow our kiwi fruit? The traditional green variety is predominantly grown in the Bay of Plenty. We've got a bit in the other regions, but predominantly there. Sorry, click, right. Our new Sun Gold is, that's the variety that's replaced the old one, the Hort 16A that had the beak. The Sun Gold's much more tolerant to PSA, so we've seen a rapid transfer from orchards who were growing the old Hort 16A into growing Sun Gold. With those, we've got a bit more distribution around the country. So particularly Gisborne, they grow some pretty great tasting gold kiwi fruit there, and also quite a lot up in Northland. So the contribution to the New Zealand economy from kiwi fruit is pretty significant. For the Bay of Plenty region, it sits at around $900 million is put into that region from kiwi fruit, and I think in terms of turnover this year, Zespri as a business will be hitting $2 billion. But we've definitely had our challenges over the last few years, and I know that last time Shane was asked to address at one of your conferences, we were in the midst of our biggest crisis, which was PSA. So looking back to then, what was the big challenge we were facing? Well, our vines were literally dying in front of us. It was, I guess, we just didn't know what we were facing at that point, and it was a pretty gloomy time. We didn't have a lot of knowledge. The PSA, from a global perspective, was pretty new. It had been found in Italy, but they were maybe a season behind New Zealand. So it pretty much put a halt to the industry, and before that we were in growth mode, but everything stopped, and it was about just survival at that point. Lack of knowledge was huge, but even more so, and this is being reflected on a lot, we've been asked to talk to the dairy industry at the moment, is is just dealing with growers who are faced with losing their livelihoods. The grower anxiety, stress is pretty significant. I wasn't in this team at the time, but people like Shane and the rest of my team, they, the time they put into just supporting growers through that time was pretty significant. I guess the other thing was it was really challenging to get coordination. So even though we're a single point of entry, you've got 2,500 growers and there's just so many people involved in the industry, and everyone was almost running in circles for a little while. So it took a couple of years to really start to pull together that coordination, and particularly around coordinated research. I was in the quality team at the time, and we literally were on the phone day after day with people who had the solution to PSA, and man, there were some weird and wonderful ones. But everyone had the silver bullet, but in the end there was no silver bullet. What we've ended up with is having to take it's an IPM approach to managing PSA. There's no silver bullet. There are some tools that are probably better than others. Some of those tools aren't ones that we want to have in our industry for a long time. So we really went into fight mode, and now we're in a position where we're trying to work out how to manage this disease along with other pests and diseases that we have to manage on a day-to-day basis. Shane said that the New Zealand industry is fully recovered, and I guess what he's meaning is we are, from a production perspective, we're seen as fully recovering, but there are still some growers whose livelihood is pretty significantly impacted by PSA. So what we're seeing is some regions like the Waikato, areas like Edgecombe, that are more challenging from a climatic perspective. PSA is more of a struggle for them, heavier soils, and so there are definitely growers out there who are still, losing their canopies season after season. We're finding that the cold is a real significant factor, not something we can do a lot about, but, growers who are knocked around with frost after frost, that seems to really, make their vines much more susceptible to PSA. But on the whole, growers now have kind of developed their own management tools to manage PSA. I just wanted I added this slide in to take a minute to reflect on the recovery, because as I said, we have been asked to address a few conferences around the country because people see the response to PSA as pretty significant. And really, as I indicated before, it's about having a coordinated industry, and that hasn't been about having a single point of entry. It's been about a whole lot of things coming together. You can see research as one part of the equation, but having effective extension networks. So that's my team's role, is to get out there and make sure that the learnings that individual growers are coming up with are translated across the industry. But really, it's about having a coordinated effort. So what does the future look like for us? Pretty bright. So by 2020, we should be delivering $3.3 billion to the New Zealand economy. And the bulk of that is coming from Gold 3. So the silver lining to our PSA cloud is that Gold 3 is actually a much better fruit to grow than our old Hort 16A. It's much more productive, it stores longer, which means we've got a longer selling window. So you can see in the yellow, we are expecting to have a significant increase in gold volumes. But the top colours, the light and orange and darker orange, are our global supply business. So that's our gold and also green plantings offshore. And the point of that business, because we get that question quite a lot, is what value does that add to our zestberry growers? It means that we can supply our markets 12 months of the year. So that's why we're pushing ahead with that business. Where's the future? It's in China, like everything else. So by 2020, China, we've gone from 2% in 2002 to being 22% of our production. So that's it's going to overtake Japan as our most valuable market. So just implications for the beekeeping industry, and I'll talk more specifically in a minute. So increasing emphasis on Gold 3, so we'll talk about covered canopies. This year we've released another 400 hectares of Gold 3, and there'll be possibly more releases over the next few seasons, but what we'll see there is people probably trading out the green for gold. So in terms of total planted area, we're not expecting a lot more. So I guess in terms of hive numbers, we would expect that to sit at the 100 to 110,000. But Gold 3 means more early hives because it flowers at the beginning of November. And I guess always pushing that need for higher quality hives, because Gold 3 is not as it's only receptive to pollination for 2 days, whereas the green is more like 5. So I guess what we're asking for is, continued support. So there are PSA protocols for moving hives, continued good quality hives being delivered to growers. You've got a commitment from us for bee safety, and that's, Gordon's our crop protection manager, and he's here to talk about any issues you might have in that space. But we're a sustainable industry, and for us, that means that your business is sustainable as well. So I guess the challenges keep coming, and I'll talk about one we've got coming up. But I haven't been involved, but Shane assures me that we've had a long-standing relationship with beekeepers over the last few decades, and we want to continue that. So I'll pass over to Dennis, who will talk a little bit more about that. Who doesn't have a
Hello, I don't have a PowerPoint. I guess I just want to speak from a beekeeper's perspective in regards to kiwifruit pollination. I myself have been doing it for 20 years. I started doing it because I happen to live in Te Puke, and that's where it is, and that's where I started beekeeping. So you do what's in your local area and away you go. And I guess I want to talk a little bit more about collaboration rather than the specifics of doing pollination. As Beth said, we've had a very good, hasn't always been good, but now we have a very good relationship with Zespri and discussing issues around pollination, which is the main areas obviously for the beekeepers to get involved. Beekeeping is just like any other business that you're going to have. You're going to have make decisions as to what do you want to do with your business, and pollination is just another part of things that is available to a beekeeper and how they can create income and use their hives or what direction they want to go in. They can add pollination to part of their business frame, or they can just do honey or a mix of both or whatever. And so all those decisions, you've got to sit down and decide what fits with you and what doesn't. Just out of interest sake, 120,000 hives in pollination, that roughly on $180 a hive or so, that's $22 million worth of income going into beekeepers' pockets coming out of just kiwifruit pollination. So it's not insignificant help or add-on to those beekeepers who want to be involved in it. And I get this question put to me, why do you do pollination? It just damages hives. And I say, well, no, probably more what damages hives is just piss-poor beekeeping. Like anything you do, if you approach it right, look at it, make a choice, you can do fine. Your hives can be done well and looked after. There's a lot of beekeepers that do kiwifruit pollination and still go on and do very good honey crops. Once again, it's about how well are you beekeeping, what are you looking at, the things you're doing right, and get those things right. And with that, we have a lot of discussions with Zespri over pollination, about hive strength, about chemical use, about all those issues that come along. When PSA come along, movement controls were put in, and the outcry from beekeepers about how do you do this and all sorts of things. We don't even hear that now because we sat with them, we discussed it, we worked out a system that worked, and I don't even hear people talking about that now. A year later, we had streptomycin use being used on pollination, and once again the outcry was loud as you could hear. And we sat down and we worked a system that how can we work together to create my way of thinking. If there's an opportunity for a beekeeper to create income for themselves in something, well, let's keep working at it until we get to a point where there is no opportunity. But while there's opportunity, let's keep sitting around the table and talking. With streptomycin, we were able to talk, and we found a way through that. And now I don't even hear anyone talking about it, because Zespri knew how important it was to us and put plans in place that they could work with, we could work with, and once again, we don't hear about it. Now, the next thing that's coming up on the horizon is netted orchards. And in the past, people just took the hive strength and what they did in open orchards, poked it into netted orchards, and complained that the orchardist was killing all their bees. No, you didn't look properly. And so now we're just going to go through the same process. We're going to work out a way that you can pollinate under netted orchards, and we're not far away, and I believe it'll come. What's the word? I myself don't do any netted orchards, and people go, you're a hypocrite, you're not doing it. No, it's just that the growers I supply haven't netted their orchards yet. When they do, and some have be thinking about it, we will sit down and we'll work a plan to do it. The whole thing about having a bee industry and dealing with another industry is, what are the things that can come out of it? If I asked how many here put their hands up, how many of you had to pay for a Tootin testing this year? Just hands up. Probably most of you. How many of you would like not to ever have to do that again? Most of you, once again. We work with Zespri. Zespri have a trouble with passion vine hopper. We have a trouble with passion vine hopper. Why aren't we talking together and saying, how can we combat this thing that benefits both of us? That's collaboration, and that's where we need to be going with anything we do as a beekeeper, regardless whether it's our honey, and we've had all discussions on honey and all the good points that Manika's given us at the moment, but pollination is just another add-on to a business. It is viable. It is worth considering about. I know a lot of beekeepers that do pollination, so they have a good honey check before pollination check before Christmas, that they can then go and pay the landowner that they've got their Manuka crops coming off. So there's all sorts of ways, to look at your business and look at what can I add in, what different things can I do, and I'm just talking about the kiwi fruit, because that's what I do, and I won't be giving it up anytime soon. I certainly like that check before Christmas. The wife certainly likes it as well. The other thing with hail netting, I know down the South Island cherry growers also got issues with hail nettings. Well, we can start talking and start finding ways, and things that are happening up here, they can start applying down there. It's all about coming together, and I hear beekeepers say to me, oh, it's easy with hail netting. No, we'll just put the bloody price up as high as I can. Bugger them. They'll get that. And then the next breath, they're complaining because the landowner that they got their hives on for Manuka wants to put his rental price up. Think, well, hang on, boys, come on. So we have a good relationship with Zespri. There is an opportunity out there for guys to sort of do, put more hives into pollination, and they certainly do have. Doesn't sound like it, they're just a corporate, but no, they actually do have our interests at heart, because they realise that we are important to what they're doing for them to make the money that they do. And with that, so as long as we keep talking, we'll get through these. Netted orchards in a few years' time, we won't even be talking about it, because we would have either found a way through it, or it'll be a thing that we just don't do, whatever it is, and we'll just keep moving on. But yeah.
Thanks, Dennis. I'm hoping we're not talking about it in 2 years' time, because I'm over it already. But okay, so kiwi fruit pollination. So I just wanted to go through, I guess, what my team's role is. So we're the interface between growers and pack houses. So we're all about promoting best practice, helping growers grow the best tasting kiwi fruit in the world. But we also have to address problems that come up. So sometimes those fester away for a little while before they come to us. Sometimes we hear about them first up. So with kiwi fruit, it's always been challenging. I wish we were almonds, but bees don't really like kiwi fruit. The pollen has very little nutritional value. There's no nectar. So it's a pretty tough gig for a bee. So our solution has been, was to have really strong hives with lots of bees. I guess it was about tricking some of them into visiting kiwifruit flowers. Kiwifruit doesn't pollinate itself, so your typical orchard has 90% female vines and 10% males. We are reliant on bees to move that pollen from the males to the females. So bees are a cupid in the kiwifruit industry. So as Dennis alluded to, we've got a new challenge, and it's Gold 3 orchards that have been covered in hail netting. So this is an aerial shot of an orchard covered in hail netting. To be honest, the growers were a little bit naive because they didn't even think about the impact of changing the environment on how they grow kiwifruit and also on the implications for the bees at all. So why are they doing it? Gold 3 is a lot more susceptible to particularly wind damage. So you can see on the right there's an example of a gold fruit that's been severely impacted by wind, but it also protects them from birds and PSA. So the industry was like, this is great, we're going to cover our orchards in hail net, but we have a problem. And so in 2014, which was only 18 months ago, we got a few growers who came and said, my beekeeper, and again they told us in September, my beekeeper wasn't that happy with his hives after they'd been pollinating in a hail net last year. We've got a bit of a problem. So what were we seeing? We were seeing reductions in brood and less bees in the hives. So that was the message. So what did we do? And this is what our team does, is we had a couple of meetings pulled together pretty quickly. Everyone stood around and we invited Mark, and everyone wanted him to come up with a solution. So growers have been trying some different things. We had people who had tried water, cutting nets, landmarks, different coloured nets, drums, and everyone's like, I've got the answer. And Mark just stood there and went, I can't tell you anything because I need to understand what the problem is. And so that was kind of our approach. So before we could go and come up with a solution, we had to understand what the problem was. And to be honest, where we've landed is probably where Mark thought we might. If he was a betting man, he would have bet where we've kind of landed, but we needed to have that evidence to be able to go out there and make some suggestions to beekeepers and growers. So we wanted to understand what the cause and effect was. And I've invited Mark up here to sit for the questions because his team have done the research. So in terms of the cause, so we did a couple of quick trials, and the first one was to understand what's happening to the bees. So what we know is the bees are behaving differently under net. So here we've got, so in this experiment they trained bees out to a food source and looked at the bees when they were coming back at the hive and saw what instruction they were giving to the other bees to get those recruits. So you can see with the dotted line, if there was no net, those bees were coming back and telling the other bees exactly where the food source was. But the solid red line, where the arrow's pointing, indicates that when you put that net over there, and it's really bad on a cloudy day, that it's going back to the hive and its dances in completely the wrong direction. The second experiment we did was to train bees along the outside of a net to a food source, so 50 metres outside, and then tried to train those bees under the net 50 metres. So the one along the outside, again, got heaps of recruits, couldn't feed them fast enough. The one going in, I think they trained 6 bees there, and in the end even they got, they didn't want to go back under there. So what we know is that bees, it's not their preference to be under hail net. The second thing we wanted to understand was, how is this impacting hive quality? So at that meeting we had some growers saying, my beekeeper's absolutely happy, there's nothing wrong with my hives. And Mark would say, well, have you looked? No. So what we wanted to understand is, are we seeing the impact on hive quality across orchards? So what was consistent, regardless of the design, because we've got roof only, we've got some that have got sides, and then we've got some that have netted right down to the bottom, was consistently the brood was coming out negatively impacted. So in some instances, pretty significantly. In terms of bee losses, that was varied. So roof only, it wasn't as bad as the fully enclosed ones. So we've kind of understood the problem, and we've tried to come up with a solution, start a solution quicker, sooner rather than later, because one, our growers, this is important to them, but we're also conscious that we don't want this to go on for too much longer with the beekeeping industry. So the first idea we had was using smaller hives, and the second was feeding pollen supplements. So the rationale with the smaller hives is, in kiwifruit, we don't need the nectar foragers, all we need is those pollen foragers. So if we had a hive that is filled with predominantly pollen foragers, so smaller, would we get less in terms of bee losses? Oh, my slide hasn't come up properly. Okay, my graphs aren't showing on this. So in that first experiment, what it has shown is that the less number of bees that we had going in, the less that's impacted on exit. But the second, probably more, just as significant, was could we just feed them a pollen supplement? Because as we said, kiwifruit doesn't have any nutritional value. So if you're putting that pollen supplement in before it goes into the orchard, are the bees just going to feed their brood using that? And so we tried that last year, and the control, which my graph's not there, but the control, so if it didn't have the pollen patty in there, the brood was 40% of what it was going in. With the pollen patty in there, it was around 90%. So, and Mark and his team didn't put that pollen patty in until it arrived in the orchard. So our question is, if it was in there a couple of days beforehand, would the brood come out as in good a condition as it did going out? Going in. So, the solution will be a new approach to pollinating under hail net. We're not in a position we know exactly what that solution is, but we're kind of starting a journey, and so that's why we're here today, and that's why we've got to stand here, is we want to have that discussion about what that solution looks like. So can we try smaller hives, so nucleus hives, or I've talked to someone here, can we just take a few frames of brood earlier and put them into and make special hail net hives that are only used for that? I'm absolutely conscious that this cannot be at the detriment of your hives that are used for honey. So one, the dollars don't add up, and two, even if it was, Zespri doesn't want to be in a position that we've got hives going in that for pollination that are coming out with, in a really poor state. That's not the industry we want to be at as well. So pollen supplements seems to be an absolute no-brainer, and I've talking to beekeepers, that doesn't seem to be something that's that unusual. So we'll be making suggestions this year that any hives going into hail net this year, at a minimum, would have pollen supplements. There's a question about whether you need to sugar feed. So as I understand, the purpose of sugar feeding for kiwifruit pollination is to turn those nectar foragers into pollen foragers. If we don't have the nectar foragers, do you need to sugar feed? That sounds like a win to beekeepers, because I understand sugar feeding is a bit of a bane of your life. Another idea is, can you move the hives in the middle of the day and leave those nectar foragers behind? Again, a win, because you're not having to get up in the middle of the night. But you're obviously leaving a hive for the nectar foragers to go back into, but that's another idea. Distributing the hives around the orchard, so rather than those big blocks, if they're smaller, we'll be suggesting to growers that they try and distribute them around. If you're not sugar feeding, that makes it a little bit more of an option. So the next step is to encourage growers to discuss this concept with beekeepers. We're not coming up with a recipe, so I've got a meeting on the 5th of July where I'm encouraging all growers with hail net to come and talk to us there. And then the instruction will be, this is what we know so far, go and have a conversation with your beekeeper, exactly like Dennis said, and see what you can work out with. We've also been successful in coming up with a sustainable farming fund project. So we've got $1.2 million to invest in this. And so we've kind of split it into 4 areas. So the first one is around how the hail net are impacting the honeybee foraging behaviour. The second is, can we come up with solutions for pollinating under hail net? Third is looking for alternative methods, so that's things like supplementing pollination or just doing things differently. And the fourth is what my team's around it, which is tech transfer and communication. So this isn't going to be an R&D project. The idea came from me, and we have worked really hard with the beekeepers and the hailnet installers and the growers and Plant and Food to come up with a project that we believe is going to deliver for kiwifruit growers and beekeepers. I just wanted to finish, I sat through the integrated, the IPM workshop for Roa the other day. So I've added this slide in because I'm pretty proud of where we've come in 18 months for this. 18 months ago we were standing in an orchard and we had no idea what was going on. 18 months later we're on our way to a solution, but it hasn't been driven by the research team. I work with research teams across a range in Plant and Food, and you guys are lucky because in my mind, this is the best team to be working for. They've got a whole lot of expertise, but they can't do it by themselves. For us, we have to contribute a huge amount of in kind, and that's not me, that's working with growers who are going to trials, give things a go. We're not on the way to a solution, but with any of this, industry-led is key. From our perspective, we have the same things around resistance and resistance challenges with some of our agrochemicals, but the key is not to expect a research team to come up with that solution. Somehow you need to get the industry leading that, because your chance of success will be much higher. It's a journey, and we're not there yet, but I think, we thank the bee industry for their continued support. It's great having people, who recognise that both industries can work side by side. We do need you, and hopefully we can make a way through this little issue, as Dennis said, and in a couple of years' time it'll be just a different way to pollinate than we have done before. So, thank you. Are there any questions? No?
Yes, I would like to ask Mark, obviously you've been doing some research work on this, clearly with Zespri, and Dennis talked about the cooperation, and that can only be good. I mean, I come from the time when we did have cooperation, and when we had a very young Mark Goodwin fronted up for a job, and that's where we started, and we had a strong collaboration between the NBA and the kiwifruit industry, and that's how a lot of that work got done on pollination, and this is why I'm asking this question. What I hear you saying as a solution for undernets is actually, to me, a complete contrast from what I heard in the early times after Mark had done and his team had done their work on how to manage a pollination unit for kiwifruit. And one of the things you talked about was having rising hives, young brood, because the brood creates the pollen gathering stimulus. And they come up with feeding sugar to get around that. You're actually all talking about something that sounds to me like a reversal, and it sounds to me a lot like the sort of concept that they put bumblebees into glass houses for pollination in these vast areas of glass houses, but they put them in on the basis that they'll be destroyed.
Yeah, it's a good question. Thanks, Alan. I think the idea is for normal orchards, for Hayward orchards, the colonies we're putting in have a high demand for pollen, but they also are built up with a relatively high demand for nectar. And the idea is that the bees will fly out of the orchard, soak up all the nectar that's there, and leave the rest of the bees to just go and collect pollen. But the problem when you put them in a cage, all those nectar foragers go out there to soak up all the nectar and get caught on the side of the cage and die there. The pollen foragers are probably still collecting pollen, which is great, but you're losing half your bee strength while they're there. So the idea we're looking at the moment and trying is to put the colonies in there without the nectar foragers, because there is no nectar there for them to collect in any case. So it's a very different way of looking at preparing hives for pollination.
Mark, have you done any work on stocking rates for the C3 variety? I believe it was growers are saying maybe we don't need as many bees per hectare, and in relation to that, stocking rates inside netted blocks. Do we need to put as many bees into these blocks that we have been?
That's a very, very good question. The very first project we're doing in this SSF project, assuming the committee signs it off, is to answer that question, is what stocking rates we need in cage blocks. At the moment we don't know. We're guessing we're probably putting in too many, but until we test it, we're not going to know. But watch the space.
I just had a silly idea. Has anybody thought of using the hail nets, but then also having a system where they can be pulled back on runners?
I guess this is one of the challenges of getting pulled into this project late. The design, and we've got 1,000 hectares of covered orchards already, and that doesn't allow for that. I know that that's what they do with cherries, but so it's not a stupid idea, and that's what they do in Italy. But the design and how we've got that 1,000 hectares. At the moment, there's not a lot of covering going on until we sort out this pollination issue. Growers are holding back, but what we've got now is some pretty permanent structures in place. So what we're trying to do is come up with a solution that works with those.
Beth, I'd like to ask the question. Is Zespri aware of what's happening in the honey industry in regards to expansion in prices and competition for bees? Because I seem to hear that we have a problem with bee deaths, etc., and a lot of people are exiting the kiwi fruit pollination industry. Are they aware of that they're competing against honey? It's far more profitable.
We absolutely are, but we're hoping it's not seen as competition. So as complementary as where we want to end up. I guess I've spoken to beekeepers at this conference who, a lot of them have got long-standing relationships with their growers, and they're committed to finding a solution. People like Dennis, but there's other people out there who I guess are seeing the opportunity. I'm not expecting that every beekeeper's interested in this. We don't need every beekeeper. We just need the proportion of the industry. But we had one grower last year who couldn't find a beekeeper. Well, his beekeeper pulled out last minute, but he's found a beekeeper for this coming season. What we need to do is make sure we've got a model. What I'm committed to making sure is we've got a model that does not impact hive quality. We're not there yet, but we've started that journey. And this $1.2 million project, it's a big commitment from Zespri. So Zespri's putting a big chunk of money, but in terms of getting the value out of that, that's pretty important from an SFF perspective. So we didn't take that lightly.
I believe you're putting another 400 hectares in, and there's going to be more going in of G3. I imagine you've worked out where the bees are coming from.
Thanks.
I guess, as I said before, Neil, as you know, that it's anyone who's in a business, and beekeeping is no different. They'll look at the facts and figures and they'll make a decision as to whether they want to do pollination or not. And once again, those issues will, no doubt, they'll be figured out as we go along. It's people's choice. There have been several people who have chosen to get out of pollination because there's more money in honey, and they've had 2 years of low honey production, and they realise I might come back in and do the sure pollination or a portion of my business in pollination because I know it's income every year. So it's a business decision, and it's actually it's really a decision between a beekeeper and an orchardist, not a beekeeper and Zespri. Zespri's only the marketing arm. It's at the end of the day, it's discussions with the orchardist and the beekeeper, and the other two that have the business relationship. Zespri in itself is just helping pull those relationships together. But you've been doing pollination for a long time. You're still doing it, so you can answer that question yourself, I guess.